Welcome to ASMR History Whisperer, where the secrets of the past come alive in a whisper. Relax as we explore the stories that shaped our world. Herodotus, often celebrated as the father of history, wasn't just a chronicler of events, he was a storyteller who wove together myth, fact, and adventure. His curiosity led him across the ancient world, from the palaces of Persia to the temples of Egypt, capturing not only the great battles that shaped civilizations but also the everyday lives and beliefs of the people he met. Through his eyes, we'll embark on a journey filled with legendary kings, gods, and ordinary people whose stories were preserved in his monumental work, the Histories. In this exploration of Herodotus' life and legacy, we'll uncover his bold travels from the sandy dunes of Egypt to the bustling markets of Athens. We'll dive into his dramatic accounts of the Greco-Persian Wars, where he recounted the valor of warriors and the cunning strategies of leaders like Xerxes and Leonidas. But Herodotus didn't stop at war. He detailed the culture, religion, and customs of various civilizations, creating a rich tapestry of the ancient world. Yet, Herodotus' work is not without controversy. Critics have long debated the accuracy of his stories, accusing him of blending myth and history. But it is precisely this mixture that has made his work stand the test of time. Herodotus' writings go beyond mere facts. They are infused with the magic of storytelling, capturing the spirit of the times in a way that still resonates today. As we dive into the life and works of Herodotus, prepare for a captivating journey through ancient lands, epic battles, and legendary figures. The world as Herodotus saw it was full of wonder and mystery, and through his words, we'll experience that world in all its grandeur and complexity. Herodotus' life and travels form the backbone of his groundbreaking work, the Histories. Born around 484 BCE in the cosmopolitan city of Halicarnassus, Herodotus grew up in a world where Persian, Greek, and other cultures intermingled. At the time, Halicarnassus was under Persian rule, but its Greek heritage was still strong. This duality between East and West shaped Herodotus' early worldview, planting the seeds of his lifelong curiosity about the interactions between cultures, politics, and societies. As a young man, Herodotus was driven by a restless spirit and a thirst for knowledge that went far beyond the borders of his homeland. Unlike many of his contemporaries who might have been content to hear second-hand accounts of foreign lands, Herodotus felt compelled to see the world for himself. His travels spanned much of the known world at the time, taking him from the vibrant cities of Greece to the sprawling empires of Persia, the mystifying temples of Egypt, and even the wild steppes of Scythia. These journeys provided him with the first-hand knowledge that would later make the Histories a unique and invaluable source of ancient information. One of Herodotus' first major destinations was Egypt, a land of immense fascination to the Greeks. Egypt, with its ancient civilization, strange customs, and monumental architecture, captured Herodotus' imagination. He marveled at the pyramids, which he described as architectural wonders, and the practice of mummification, which seemed both eerie and sacred to him. But Herodotus was not content with simply observing. He wanted to understand. He spoke to priests, locals, and travelers, trying to piece together not only how the Egyptians lived but why they believed and behaved as they did. Egypt, in Herodotus' eyes, was a land of deep mystery, but one that revealed much about the human quest for immortality, divine connection, and order in the universe. From Egypt, Herodotus traveled to Babylon, another seat of ancient power, where he encountered the great city's walls and ziggurats. He marveled at the vastness of the Persian Empire, which spanned continents and connected diverse peoples under a single rule. Herodotus was especially fascinated by the Persian kings and their immense wealth and authority. The contrast between the autocratic rule of the Persian emperors and the democratic principles emerging in Greece was not lost on him. This contrast would become a recurring theme in the histories, where Herodotus often pondered the nature of power, freedom, and the fragility of empires. One of the more remote places Herodotus visited was Scythia, the land of nomadic tribes who lived on the northern fringes of the known world. The Scythians were vastly different from the settled, urban peoples Herodotus had encountered in places like Egypt and Persia. They lived on horseback, moved with the seasons, and were fierce warriors who raided their neighbors with brutal efficiency. Herodotus was struck by their way of life, which seemed primitive compared to the sophistication of the cities he had seen. Yet, in the Scythians, he saw a different kind of strength, one rooted in survival, adaptability, and freedom from the constraints of settled life. Throughout his travels, Herodotus showed an insatiable curiosity for the customs, religions, and daily lives of the people he encountered. He wasn't merely interested in great battles or political power, he wanted to understand the very fabric of the societies he visited. How did they worship their gods? What were their rituals and ceremonies? How did they govern themselves? Herodotus realized that the story of humanity was as much about culture as it was about conquest, and he sought to preserve those cultural details in his writings. One of the most remarkable aspects of Herodotus' work is his methodology. For his time, Herodotus employed a remarkably modern approach to gathering information. He did not rely solely on the accounts of officials or royalty. Instead, he made a point of speaking to ordinary people, seeking out multiple perspectives on a given event or tradition. He was aware of the possibility of bias and exaggeration in the stories he collected, and he often included different versions of events to allow readers to draw their own conclusions. This method set him apart from other writers of his time and gave his work a richness and depth that is still appreciated today. However, Herodotus' love of storytelling sometimes led him to include tales that blurred the line between fact and fiction. He was not always skeptical of the more fantastical elements of the stories he heard, which earned him criticism even in his own time. Some later historians accused him of being more of a father of lies than the father of history. Despite these criticisms, Herodotus' approach reflects the belief that myth and history were not mutually exclusive, they both held truths about the human experience. As Herodotus journeyed across the ancient world, he was constantly collecting, observing, and learning. His travels gave him a unique vantage point from which to observe the complexities of human civilization, its achievements, its conflicts, and its endless diversity. He was not just a passive recorder of facts, he was an active participant in the cultural exchange between East and West, Greek and barbarian, conqueror and conquered. Through his travels, Herodotus expanded the scope of history itself, turning it from a simple record of events into a broad and sweeping narrative of human endeavor. In the end, Herodotus' travels shaped not only his life, but also the course of historical writing. His desire to explore the unknown and document the wonders of the world set a standard for future generations of historians. By placing culture, tradition, and human nature at the forefront of his inquiry, Herodotus created a lasting legacy that continues to inspire both historians and storytellers to this day. Father of History title, Herodotus' contribution to historical writing. Herodotus earned the title Father of History because of his groundbreaking work in recording and analyzing events in a way that no one had done before. Before Herodotus, history was often a mixture of legend, myth, and oral tradition, passed down through generations with little regard for accuracy or critical examination. But Herodotus sought to change that. His monumental work, the Histories, written around 430 BCE, aimed to provide a thorough and detailed account of the Greco-Persian Wars, the rise and fall of empires, and the customs and cultures of the many people he encountered during his travels. This work established him as one of the earliest known historians whose influence still resonates in modern historical methods. The Histories was not just a simple chronicle of events. Herodotus wove together facts, personal observations, and stories he heard from others into a rich narrative that spanned multiple cultures and centuries. He wanted to preserve the memory of great deeds and offer explanations for why things happened the way they did. His goal was not just to record events, but to analyze them, seeking to understand the causes of conflicts, the motivations of leaders, and the outcomes of battles. This analytical approach was revolutionary at the time, moving history beyond mere storytelling and into the realm of inquiry. Herodotus' work was groundbreaking because he introduced a new way of thinking about history as a systematic study of human events. He emphasized the importance of eyewitness accounts, even though he sometimes included stories that blurred the lines between fact and legend. In fact, one of Herodotus' defining features as a historian was his use of multiple sources to construct his narratives. He would often present conflicting versions of events and allow the reader to decide which seemed most plausible, a technique that gave his work a level of nuance and depth that was rare for his time. For example, in recounting the famous Battle of Thermopylae, where 300 Spartans held off the massive Persian army, Herodotus provided vivid descriptions of both the bravery of the Greek forces and the overwhelming might of the Persians. His account remains one of the primary sources for this legendary conflict, yet he does not shy away from including the dramatic or mythical elements that his sources recounted. He presents both the heroism of King Leonidas and the divine will of the gods as factors influencing the outcome of the battle. This blend of myth and fact is what made Herodotus unique. He was aware of the power of storytelling but still attempted to read his accounts and observe reality. In addition to war, Herodotus also focused on the broader human condition, emphasizing the role of culture, tradition, and environment in shaping historical events. He believed that understanding the customs and practices of different peoples was essential to understanding their motivations. His inclusion of detailed descriptions of Persian, Egyptian, and Scythian customs was not only meant to educate his Greek audience but also to provide context for why these peoples acted as they did in the grander historical narrative. Yet, while Herodotus is celebrated for his innovations, he was not without his critics, both in his own time and in later generations. Some of his contemporaries, like the historian Thucydides, found fault with his willingness to include stories that lacked clear evidence. Thucydides, who wrote the history of the Peloponnesian War shortly after Herodotus, took a much stricter approach to historical writing, focusing on verifiable facts and eyewitness accounts while dismissing mythological elements. Thucydides' criticism of Herodotus set the stage for a long-standing debate within the field of history. To what extent should historians rely on legend and storytelling to fill in the gaps of the historical record? Nevertheless, Herodotus' work transcended these critiques. His contribution to the field of history lay not only in the facts he recorded but in the methodology he developed. He established a standard for future historians, advocating for the careful collection of evidence, the importance of diverse perspectives, and the value of context in understanding historical events. His work served as a bridge between oral tradition and written history, combining the narrative richness of myth with the emerging discipline of historical inquiry. Moreover, Herodotus' ability to humanize history has ensured his lasting influence. By focusing on the individuals behind great events, the beliefs that drove them, and the cultural practices that defined them, he made history accessible and engaging to his readers. He understood that history was not just a series of dates and battles, but a tapestry of human experience, shaped by geography, culture, religion, and the ambitions of leaders. In the centuries that followed, Herodotus' influence continued to grow. While some of his accounts may have been exaggerated or inaccurate, his fundamental approach to history, as a study of human affairs shaped by both grand events and everyday life, remains a cornerstone of modern historiography. His title as the father of history is not just a reflection of his role as one of the first historians, but of his pioneering spirit in seeking to understand the complexities of the past. In summary, Herodotus earned his title not simply because he was one of the first to write down history, but because of how he did it. He elevated history from a mere recounting of events to a thoughtful and engaging exploration of human nature, culture, and conflict. His work paved the way for future historians, and his contributions still echo in the study of history today. The Greco-Persian Wars, Herodotus' most famous subject. One of the central themes in Herodotus' The Histories is the Greco-Persian Wars, a series of epic conflicts between the Persian Empire and various Greek city-states in the early 5th century BCE. These wars, particularly the famous battles of Marathon, Thermopylae, Salamis, and Plataea, form the backbone of Herodotus' historical narrative. His accounts of these battles provide invaluable insight into the clash between the vast Persian Empire and the smaller, more fragmented Greek world. Herodotus sought to chronicle the Greco-Persian Wars not just as a series of military encounters, but as a monumental clash of civilizations, East versus West, tyranny versus freedom. The wars were, in his eyes, a decisive moment in history that defined the future of the Greek world and set the course for the rise of democratic Athens as a major power. The rise of the Persian Empire and its expansion. Herodotus begins his narrative by explaining the rise of the Persian Empire under leaders like Cyrus the Great, Darius I, and Xerxes I. He details how the empire expanded rapidly, conquering vast swathes of territory across Asia and into the Mediterranean. Herodotus is fascinated by the sheer scale of the Persian Empire, noting its wealth, military might, and the vast number of cultures and peoples it ruled. The Persians were not just a political force, but a symbol of Eastern autocracy, in contrast to the burgeoning democratic ideals of the Greek city-states. The Persian desire to expand into Greece was, according to Herodotus, driven by a combination of ambition, revenge, and a desire for control over the Mediterranean. Darius I, the Persian king, first set his sights on Greece after a failed rebellion by Greek cities in Ionia, modern-day Turkey, known as the Ionian Revolt. This revolt, which was supported by Athens, angered Darius and set the stage for the first Persian invasion of Greece in 490 BCE. Herodotus paints this conflict as a story of a small, divided Greece standing up to the overwhelming force of a mighty empire, a classic underdog tale that resonates through history. The Battle of Marathon. One of the most iconic moments in Herodotus' account is the Battle of Marathon, where a small Athenian army, led by the general Miltiades, faced the much larger Persian forces. Herodotus' vivid depiction of the battle emphasizes the bravery and tactical prowess of the Greeks, who managed to hold their ground and ultimately defeat the Persians. This victory, according to Herodotus, was a turning point that gave the Greeks hope and confidence in their ability to resist the might of Persia. Herodotus' account of Marathon is filled with drama and tension, highlighting the disparity between the two sides. He describes how the Athenians, with no help from the other Greek city-states, stood alone against the Persian army. The Athenians' victory is presented not only as a military triumph, but as a moral and ideological victory for Greek freedom and independence. This theme of freedom versus tyranny is one that Herodotus revisits throughout the histories, framing the Greco-Persian Wars as a struggle for the very soul of Greece. The invasion of Xerxes and the Battle of Thermopylae. The Second Persian invasion of Greece, led by Xerxes in 480 BCE, forms the climax of Herodotus' narrative. Xerxes' army was, by Herodotus' estimation, the largest the world had ever seen, comprising hundreds of thousands of soldiers, ships, and supplies. Herodotus takes great care to describe the sheer size and scope of the Persian invasion, emphasizing the logistical challenges of moving such a massive force across the Hellespont, modern-day Dardanelles, and through Greece. The most famous battle of this invasion, and perhaps the most legendary in all of Herodotus' work, is the Battle of Thermopylae. Herodotus describes in detail how a small coalition of Greek forces, led by King Leonidas of Sparta, defended the narrow pass of Thermopylae against the advancing Persian army. The Greeks, vastly outnumbered, held the pass for several days before being betrayed by a local who showed the Persians a secret path around the mountains. The heroism of Leonidas and his 300 Spartans, who fought to the death against overwhelming odds, became one of the most enduring symbols of courage and sacrifice in Western history. Herodotus' account immortalizes the bravery of the Spartans and their allies, casting them as defenders of Greek freedom who were willing to give their lives to protect their homeland. Even though the battle was ultimately a Persian victory, Herodotus presents it as a moral victory for the Greeks, demonstrating their determination and unity in the face of impossible odds. The naval battle of Salamis. Following the fall of Thermopylae, the Persian army marched south and sacked Athens. However, the tide of the war turned at sea with the Battle of Salamis, one of the most important naval engagements in ancient history. Herodotus describes how the Athenian general Themistocles, through cunning strategy and manipulation, lured the Persian navy into the narrow straits of Salamis, where the larger Persian ships struggled to maneuver. The smaller, more agile Greek triremes attacked decisively, overwhelming the Persian fleet and securing a critical victory for the Greeks. Herodotus presents Themistocles as a brilliant strategist who understood the importance of naval power in defending Greece. The victory at Salamis not only saved the Greek city-states from destruction but also shattered Xerxes' ambitions of conquest, forcing him to retreat back to Asia with the remnants of his army. This battle, according to Herodotus, was a defining moment in the war, marking the beginning of the end for the Persian invasion. The Battle of Plataea and the end of the war. The final major battle in Herodotus' account is the Battle of Plataea, fought in 479 BCE, where a coalition of Greek forces decisively defeated the remaining Persian troops. Herodotus emphasizes the unity of the Greek city-states in this battle, showing how Sparta, Athens, and others came together to drive the Persians out of Greece once and for all. This victory marked the end of the Persian threat and solidified Greece's place as a rising power in the ancient world. Herodotus' retelling of the Greco-Persian Wars is not just a history of battles and military campaigns. It is a narrative of cultural conflict, where the values of freedom, democracy, and unity are pitted against autocracy, imperialism, and tyranny. Through his detailed and often dramatic accounts of the wars, Herodotus crafted a powerful story that has shaped how we remember these events for centuries. In the histories, the Greco-Persian Wars serve as a backdrop for a broader exploration of human nature, politics, and the clash of civilizations. Herodotus masterfully balances the grand scope of these conflicts with the personal stories of the people involved, making his work not just a record of events but a reflection on the forces that shape history itself. His accounts of these wars remain one of the most important sources of information about this critical period, influencing generations of historians, writers, and artists. Egypt and Herodotus' cultural discoveries. Herodotus' fascination with Egypt is one of the most captivating parts of the histories. For the ancient Greeks, Egypt was a land of great mystery and ancient wisdom, a place with a history that stretched back thousands of years before their own civilization emerged. Herodotus, eager to understand the world beyond Greece, spent considerable time in Egypt, recording not just the country's military and political history but also its rich religious traditions, unique customs, and monumental achievements. His accounts of Egypt offer a glimpse into the deep curiosity and wonder that drove him as a historian and traveler. Herodotus' encounter with Egypt's ancient civilization. When Herodotus visited Egypt around the mid-5th century BCE, it was already a place of awe-inspiring antiquity. The pyramids of Giza, the temples of Luxor, and the statues of the pharaohs had stood for centuries, and Egypt's monumental architecture filled Herodotus with admiration. In the histories, he writes about the construction of the pyramids with great fascination, particularly focusing on the Great Pyramid of Giza. He recounts stories he heard from Egyptian priests about the labor involved in building these colossal structures, estimating that the construction took around 20 years and required the efforts of thousands of workers. Herodotus' descriptions of Egypt's monuments, such as the pyramids, reflect his deep admiration for the engineering and architectural achievements of the Egyptians. While modern archaeological research has provided more accurate accounts of these constructions, Herodotus' vivid storytelling captures the sense of wonder that these ancient structures evoked in visitors. The religious practices of the Egyptians. One of the most intriguing aspects of Herodotus' account of Egypt is his detailed description of its religious practices. He was particularly fascinated by the Egyptians' relationship with their gods and the elaborate rituals they performed in their honor. Herodotus devoted a significant portion of his narrative to explaining how the Egyptians worshipped their gods and how their beliefs were integrated into everyday life. For Herodotus, Egyptian religion was both fascinating and foreign. He noted that the Egyptians had a deep reverence for animals, particularly those associated with their gods, such as cats, crocodiles, and ibises. He was intrigued by their practices of mummification, which preserved the bodies of the dead in elaborate rituals designed to ensure safe passage to the afterlife. Herodotus viewed these customs with a mixture of curiosity and respect, even as he struggled to understand the motivations behind them. He also described the pantheon of Egyptian gods, including Ra, the sun god, and Osiris, the god of the afterlife, drawing comparisons between Egyptian deities and their Greek counterparts. For instance, he identified Osiris with the Greek god Dionysus and noted that the Egyptians celebrated festivals similar to the Greek religious rites. This comparison was part of Herodotus' broader goal of connecting different cultures through shared religious and philosophical ideas, despite their surface-level differences. Herodotus also recounted the story of the divine lineage of the pharaohs, explaining how the Egyptians believed that their rulers were directly descended from the gods. He observed that the Egyptian king played a central role in religious ceremonies and was seen as a vital link between the human and divine realms. Herodotus was particularly interested in the way Egyptian religious beliefs permeated all aspects of life, from agriculture and festivals to laws and social customs. The Nile, lifeblood of Egypt. Another significant focus of Herodotus' account of Egypt is the Nile River, which he recognized as the key to Egypt's prosperity. Herodotus famously wrote that Egypt is the gift of the Nile, acknowledging how the river's annual flooding enriched the soil and allowed for agriculture to flourish in an otherwise arid landscape. The cyclical nature of the Nile's flooding, which deposited nutrient-rich silt across the floodplains, was essential for sustaining Egypt's economy and food supply. This agricultural abundance allowed the ancient Egyptians to build their cities, temples, and monumental architecture. Herodotus described the natural phenomena of the Nile with a sense of awe and reverence, understanding how crucial the river was to Egyptian civilization. However, he was also puzzled by some of the natural features of the river, particularly its source, which remained unknown to him. Although modern geography has since explained the origins of the Nile, Herodotus' curiosity about the river reflects his broader desire to understand the natural world. Herodotus' account of Egypt also emphasized how the Nile shaped Egyptian society and culture. The river not only provided sustenance but also played a central role in religion, trade, and transportation. Herodotus remarked on the extensive irrigation systems the Egyptians developed to control the river's flow and distribute its waters to their fields. The Nile, in his view, was both a natural wonder and a symbol of Egypt's enduring strength. Egypt's historical significance and relationship with Greece. Herodotus recognized Egypt as one of the world's oldest and most advanced civilizations, and his writings about it reflect a deep respect for its historical importance. In the histories, he frequently contrasts Egypt's ancient traditions with the newer cultures of Greece and Persia, noting the deep wisdom and knowledge that the Egyptians possessed. He considered Egypt a place where history, religion, and culture were preserved and passed down over millennia, and he often portrayed the Egyptians as wise and learned, particularly in the fields of mathematics, medicine, and astronomy. Herodotus also explored the historical connections between Egypt and Greece, particularly through trade and shared cultural influences. He believed that many Greek religious practices and myths had their origins in Egypt, which further reinforced the idea that Egypt was a foundational civilization that shaped the development of the Mediterranean world. This belief highlights Herodotus' broader view that history was not just about wars and conquests, but also about cultural exchange and the diffusion of knowledge between different peoples. However, Herodotus' portrayal of Egypt was not without its inaccuracies. While he attempted to understand and record Egyptian history, he sometimes misinterpreted or romanticized aspects of their culture. For instance, his description of the construction of the pyramids, while compelling, is not entirely accurate by modern standards. Still, his fascination with Egypt was genuine, and he made a considerable effort to capture the essence of this ancient land in his work. Herodotus' exploration of Egypt represents one of the earliest and most detailed accounts of the ancient world's greatest civilization. His curiosity, admiration, and respect for Egyptian customs and history reflect his broader approach to history, one that sought to understand not just the events of the past but the cultures, beliefs, and practices that shape the human experience. Though not always entirely accurate, Herodotus' accounts provided the Greek world with a valuable window into the mysteries of Egypt and helped to preserve the legacy of a civilization that had stood for millennia. By focusing on Egypt's religion, geography, and historical significance, Herodotus ensured that this ancient land would be remembered not just for its battles and rulers, but for its rich culture and the wisdom of its people. His writings continue to inspire curiosity about the ancient world and remain a vital source of knowledge about one of history's greatest civilizations. Religious and mythological narratives in Herodotus' work. Herodotus' The Histories is more than a simple recounting of historical events. It is also a rich tapestry woven with religious and mythological elements that reflect the belief systems of the ancient world. In Herodotus' time, religion was deeply intertwined with daily life, politics, and warfare, and mythological narratives were often used to explain the seemingly inexplicable forces that shaped human destiny. In his writing, Herodotus doesn't just document what happened, he delves into why events occurred, often attributing outcomes to the intervention of the gods or divine will. Herodotus' understanding of religion and mythology was complex, and he used these themes to provide deeper context for the historical events he described. He showed how beliefs in divine forces guided the decisions of kings, generals, and ordinary people, reflecting the cultural importance of religion in shaping the actions and motivations of entire societies. While Herodotus often attempted to take a rational, investigative approach, he recognized that religion was an essential aspect of understanding the ancient world. The role of the gods in history. In the histories, the gods are not distant, indifferent deities. Herodotus portrays them as active participants in human affairs, frequently intervening in both subtle and dramatic ways. This belief was widespread in the ancient world, where people saw the gods' influence in everything from military victories to natural disasters. Herodotus mirrors this worldview, often attributing significant historical events to divine favor or the lack thereof. For example, during the Greco-Persian Wars, Herodotus describes how the Greeks believed their victories were aided by the gods. At the Battle of Salamis, the Greek fleet's ability to outmaneuver the much larger Persian navy was seen as evidence of divine intervention. Themistocles, the Athenian general, is depicted as not only a brilliant strategist but also as someone favored by the gods, using cunning and divine science to lead the Greeks to victory. This blending of human agency with divine influence is a recurring theme in Herodotus' writing, as he often implies that the success of military and political leaders was dependent on the gods' will. In contrast, Herodotus also shows how hubris, or excessive pride, could provoke the wrath of the gods. This theme is especially prominent in his accounts of Persian leaders like Xerxes, whose overconfidence in his ability to conquer Greece led to his eventual downfall. Herodotus suggests that Xerxes' failure was not just a result of military miscalculations, but also a divine punishment for his arrogance. Xerxes' attempt to bridge the Hellespont by constructing a massive pontoon bridge across the water, only for it to be destroyed by a storm, is one such moment where Herodotus links natural events to the anger of the gods. Xerxes' decision to have the sea whipped as punishment for destroying his bridge further exemplifies the interplay between human arrogance and divine retribution in Herodotus' narrative. Divine retribution and fate. Herodotus also incorporates the concept of divine retribution, known as nemesis, in his work. In Greek thought, nemesis was the idea that those who committed acts of hubris or offended the gods would eventually be punished. Herodotus frequently invokes this idea to explain the downfalls of powerful rulers and empires. The Persians, for instance, are often portrayed as committing acts of hubris by overextending their empire and underestimating the power of the Greeks, leading to their eventual defeat. Herodotus often emphasizes the role of fate in human affairs. The notion that events were preordained by the gods or dictated by fate was a fundamental part of ancient belief systems. While humans have free will, their destinies were ultimately shaped by forces beyond their control. This is reflected in many of Herodotus' accounts, where he describes how key figures, such as Croesus, king of Lydia, misinterpreted or ignored oracles and divine signs, leading to their downfall. In the case of Croesus, Herodotus recounts how the king sought guidance from the oracle of Delphi before engaging in war with Persia. The oracle famously told Croesus that if he waged war, he would destroy a great empire. Croesus, believing this meant victory, went to war, only to realize too late that the great empire destroyed was his own. This story highlights Herodotus' view that fate and divine were often inscrutable and that even the wisest and most powerful rulers could not escape their destiny. The misinterpretation of omens and oracles is a recurring theme, showing that human understanding of the divine was always limited. Herodotus believed that these moments of misjudgment often led to tragic consequences, reinforcing the idea that the gods' plans were unknowable and not always favorable to mortals. Comparative religion, exploring different cultures' beliefs. One of the remarkable aspects of Herodotus' work is his comparative approach to religion. Throughout his travels, Herodotus encountered a wide variety of religious practices and beliefs, and he often took care to record and explain them. His descriptions of Egyptian, Persian, and Scythian religious customs are some of the most detailed in the histories, providing a valuable insight into the diversity of religious thought in the ancient world. In Egypt, for example, Herodotus was fascinated by the religious rituals surrounding death and the afterlife. He observed the practice of mummification and the elaborate burial customs of the Egyptians, noting how their belief in an afterlife shaped their society. Herodotus also compared the Egyptian gods to Greek deities, finding similarities between them, such as identifying the Egyptian god Osiris with the Greek god Dionysus. His observations about Egyptian religion reflect his broader attempt to connect different cultures and highlight the shared religious values that underpin ancient societies. In his accounts of Persian religious customs, Herodotus noted that the Persians had a very different relationship with their gods compared to the Greeks. He remarked that the Persians did not build temples or statues to their gods, as the Greeks did, but instead worshipped them through natural elements like fire, water, and the sky. Herodotus also described the Zoroastrian practice of exposure, in which the bodies of the dead were left in the open to be consumed by birds, reflecting their belief in the sanctity of the elements. Herodotus' comparative analysis of religion across cultures was groundbreaking for his time. He approached the topic with an open mind, acknowledging the differences between Greek religion and the beliefs of other civilizations, while also drawing connections between them. This approach allowed him to present a more comprehensive view of the ancient world and underscored his belief that understanding a society's religion was key to understanding its history. The use of myth in explaining historical events. While Herodotus aimed to be a historian, he did not hesitate to incorporate myths and legends into his narrative when they helped to explain historical events. For the ancient Greeks, myths were not just stories, they were part of the collective memory of the people and provided moral and ethical lessons. Herodotus often uses mythological references to illustrate the significance of an event or to offer an explanation for why things happened the way they did. For example, in his account of the founding of the city of Cyrene, Herodotus tells the story of the oracle of Delphi instructing the Greek settlers to establish their colony in Libya. The oracle's prophecy gave divine legitimacy to the venture, suggesting that the success of the colony was not just due to the settlers' efforts but also to the favor of the gods. Herodotus often blends such mythological elements with historical facts, creating a narrative that was both engaging and reflective of the worldview of his time. Herodotus' use of myth also extends to his explanations of natural phenomena. In his descriptions of the geography of the world, he often invokes mythological creatures or gods as explanations for why rivers flow in certain directions or why certain lands are shaped the way they are. For example, in describing the Nile River's mysterious flooding, Herodotus admits that he doesn't know the exact cause but suggests that the gods may have played a role. While modern science would offer different explanations, Herodotus' inclusion of myth reflects his attempt to understand the natural world through the lens of his cultural beliefs. Herodotus' ability to intertwine religion, myth, and history makes the histories more than just a record of events. It's a rich exploration of the beliefs that shaped ancient civilizations. For Herodotus, the gods were not just passive observers of history, they were active participants whose influence could be seen in every aspect of life. His accounts of divine intervention, fate, and retribution reflect the deeply held beliefs of his time, offering insight into how ancient peoples understood their world. Through his comparative approach to religion, Herodotus also demonstrates a remarkable openness to other cultures. He recognized that the gods and religious practices of Egypt, Persia, and Scythia were different from those of Greece, but he also saw common threads that linked them together. By blending myth with fact, Herodotus created a narrative that remains captivating and thought-provoking, offering readers not only a history of ancient events but also a window into the minds of the people who lived through them. East versus West, Herodotus' view of the Persian and Greek conflict. One of the central themes of Herodotus' The Histories is the enduring conflict between the Greek world and the Persian Empire, which he framed as a fundamental clash of civilizations, East versus West. Herodotus didn't simply view the Persian Wars as a series of military engagements, he saw them as a larger ideological struggle between two very different cultures and political systems. On one side was the vast and powerful Persian Empire, which represented autocracy, centralization, and the East. On the other side were the Greek city-states, characterized by independence, democracy, and the ideals of the West. This conflict, as Herodotus portrayed it, wasn't just about land or power, it was about contrasting ways of life and governance. Persian autocracy versus Greek freedom. Herodotus presents the Persian Empire as a centralized, autocratic state ruled by a single, powerful monarch whose authority was absolute. The Persian king was seen not just as a ruler but as a divine figure, and his word was law throughout the empire. This system of government, according to Herodotus, allowed the Persians to expand their empire rapidly, incorporating a wide variety of peoples and cultures under a single, unified rule. However, Herodotus was also critical of this system. He saw the Persian monarchy as rigid and prone to the whims of a single ruler, which often led to arrogance and overreach. In contrast, Herodotus viewed the Greek city-states, particularly Athens, as paragons of freedom and self-governance. Although the Greek world was politically fragmented, with each city-state, or polis, operating independently, Herodotus emphasized the value of their independence. He celebrated the concept of democracy, especially in Athens, where citizens had a say in how they were governed. This, to Herodotus, represented the highest form of governance, a system where individuals had the freedom to participate in their own rule rather than being subjects to the will of a distant emperor. This dichotomy between Persian autocracy and Greek freedom is a recurring theme throughout Herodotus' work. The Persian rulers, particularly Darius and Xerxes, are often depicted as ambitious and power-hungry, constantly seeking to expand their control. In contrast, the Greeks, though smaller and often at odds with each other, are shown as fighting for their freedom, their homes, and their way of life. The idea that the Greeks were defending something greater than themselves, their liberty and autonomy, gives their resistance against the Persians a moral and ideological weight in Herodotus' narrative. The Persian approach to conquest. Herodotus' depiction of the Persian Empire highlights the vastness of its reach and the diversity of its peoples. The Persians ruled over a vast swath of territory, stretching from the Aegean Sea to the Indus River, encompassing many different cultures, languages, and religions. Herodotus was fascinated by the sheer scale of the empire and the administrative methods the Persians used to control such a large and varied population. He detailed how the Persians employed local rulers and customs to maintain order in their provinces, allowing a degree of cultural autonomy while still asserting Persian dominance. Herodotus acknowledged the efficiency and organization of the Persian system, particularly its use of satraps, provincial governors, to manage different regions of the empire. However, he was also critical of the Persian approach to conquest, which he saw as being driven by greed and an insatiable desire for expansion. The Persians, in his view, were constantly seeking new territories to subjugate, and this expansionist mindset ultimately led to their downfall when they overreached by trying to conquer Greece. Herodotus contrasts this with the Greek approach to warfare and conquest, which he portrays as being more defensive and rooted in the desire to protect their homeland and way of life. The Greeks, particularly the Athenians and Spartans, are shown as reluctant warriors who only take up arms when their freedom is at stake. This distinction between Persian aggression and Greek defense helps to frame the Persian Wars as not just a military conflict but a moral one, with the Greeks standing as the defenders of liberty against the Persian threat of tyranny. Xerxes and the hubris of Eastern kings. Herodotus' portrayal of Xerxes, the Persian king who led the second invasion of Greece, serves as a vivid example of the dangers of autocratic rule. Xerxes is depicted as a ruler consumed by hubris, excessive pride, a common theme in Greek literature that refers to the arrogance of individuals who defy the natural order or the gods. According to Herodotus, Xerxes' decision to invade Greece was driven by his desire for glory and his belief in his own invincibility. One of the most famous examples of Xerxes' hubris in the histories is his reaction to the destruction of the pontoon bridge he had built across the Hellespont, modern-day Dardanelles, to transport his army into Greece. When a storm destroyed the bridge, Xerxes reportedly ordered that the sea be whipped as punishment, demonstrating his belief that even nature should bend to his will. Herodotus uses this episode to illustrate the king's arrogance and the extent to which he believed his power was absolute. This hubris, Herodotus suggests, ultimately led to Xerxes' downfall, as his overconfidence blinded him to the realities of the war and the resilience of the Greek forces. Herodotus also contrasts Xerxes with the Greek leaders, who are portrayed as more pragmatic and grounded in their decision-making. Themistocles, the Athenian general who masterminded the Greek victory at the Battle of Salamis, is depicted as a shrewd and cunning strategist who used guile and intelligence to defeat the larger Persian forces. Herodotus suggests that the Greeks' reliance on reason, strategy, and collaboration, rather than hubris, was key to their success in repelling the Persian invasions. Cultural differences and mutual curiosity. Despite the stark contrast he draws between the Greeks and Persians, Herodotus also acknowledges a certain degree of mutual respect and curiosity between the two cultures. He often describes Persian customs and traditions with fascination, noting their differences from Greek practices but not condemning them outright. In fact, Herodotus seemed to admire certain aspects of Persian society, such as their emphasis on meritocracy within the royal court, where individuals could rise to positions of power based on their abilities rather than their birth. Herodotus also details how the Persians adopted certain Greek customs and vice versa. He notes that after the Persians conquered Greek cities in Ionia, there was a cultural exchange that saw the blending of Persian and Greek ideas, architecture, and religion. Herodotus saw this cultural mixing as both a positive and a negative. While it brought about new innovations and ideas, it also threatened to erode the distinctiveness of Greek culture. In this way, Herodotus' work is not simply a tale of Greeks versus barbarians, as might be expected from a Greek historian. Instead, he offers a more nuanced view of the Persian-Greek relationship, one that acknowledges the complexities of cultural interaction, trade, and diplomacy. While he clearly sides with the Greeks in their struggle for independence, he does not dismiss the Persian Empire as purely villainous or barbaric. Instead, Herodotus presents the Persians as a powerful and sophisticated civilization, but one whose imperial ambitions and autocratic system ultimately led to its downfall when it clashed with the fiercely independent Greeks. The Persian Wars as a defining moment for the West. For Herodotus, the Greco-Persian Wars were not just a series of battles but a defining moment in the history of the West. These conflicts, particularly the victories at Marathon, Thermopylae, and Salamis, were seen as the triumph of Greek ideals of freedom and self-governance over the tyranny and despotism of the Persian Empire. The wars, in Herodotus' view, cemented Greece's place as a defender of liberty and laid the foundation for the cultural and political developments that would follow, particularly the rise of Athens as a center of democracy, philosophy, and the arts. Herodotus' portrayal of the Persian-Greek conflict also had a lasting impact on how future generations understood the relationship between East and West. The idea of a fundamental clash between Eastern autocracy and Western democracy, as presented in the histories, would resonate throughout history, shaping the way later civilizations viewed the differences between these two regions. In many ways, Herodotus' narrative of East versus West became a foundational myth for Western civilization, influencing how Europe and the West saw themselves in relation to the broader world. Herodotus' depiction of the Greco-Persian Wars as a clash between East and West laid the groundwork for much of Western historical thinking. His emphasis on the values of Greek freedom and democracy, juxtaposed with the autocratic nature of the Persian Empire, framed the conflict in moral and ideological terms that went beyond mere military engagements. While Herodotus clearly sympathized with the Greeks, he also offered a nuanced view of the Persian Empire, acknowledging its power, sophistication, and cultural achievements. Through the histories, Herodotus not only documented the events of the wars but also shaped how future generations would understand the nature of the conflict between East and West, an idea that would echo throughout history. Key figures in Herodotus' work: kings, warriors, and leaders. Herodotus' The Histories is populated with a wide array of key figures, kings, warriors, and leaders who played pivotal roles in shaping the course of events in the ancient world. These individuals were not merely passive characters in a grand historical narrative, but were often the driving forces behind the most significant moments in history. Herodotus' focus on these figures brings the narrative to life, giving readers a glimpse into the personalities, motivations, and actions of the leaders who shaped their time. Through their decisions and actions, we see the complexities of power, ambition, and destiny play out on the world stage. Herodotus is particularly adept at humanizing these leaders, showing not just their triumphs but also their flaws, mistakes, and moments of hubris. By doing so, he offers a rich and nuanced portrayal of leadership and power in the ancient world. Cyrus the Great, founder of the Persian Empire. Herodotus begins his account of the Persian Empire with Cyrus the Great, the empire's founder and one of the most celebrated leaders in ancient history. Cyrus is depicted as a charismatic and wise ruler who expanded the Persian Empire to encompass much of the Near East, including Babylon, Lydia, and parts of Asia Minor. Herodotus admired Cyrus' military prowess and political acumen, recognizing him as a figure who brought stability and prosperity to a vast and diverse empire. Herodotus recounts the story of Cyrus' rise to power, focusing on how he overthrew the Median king Astyages and unified the Persian tribes. One of the key themes in Herodotus' portrayal of Cyrus is his ability to balance force with diplomacy. While Cyrus was undoubtedly a great military leader, Herodotus also highlights his capacity for mercy and statesmanship. For example, after capturing Babylon, Cyrus reportedly allowed the Babylonian people to continue practicing their own customs and religions, earning their loyalty. Despite his successes, Herodotus also notes that Cyrus met a tragic end in battle against the Massagetæ, a nomadic tribe in Central Asia. This moment of downfall serves as a reminder of the unpredictability of fate, a theme that Herodotus frequently returns to throughout the histories. Even the greatest of rulers, like Cyrus, were not immune to the forces of destiny. Darius I, organizer of the Persian Empire. Darius I, who followed Cyrus, is another key figure in Herodotus' work. While Cyrus laid the foundation for the Persian Empire, it was Darius who organized and consolidated it. Herodotus praises Darius for his administrative reforms, including the division of the empire into satrapies, provinces, governed by local rulers who answered directly to the king. This system allowed the Persian Empire to maintain control over its vast territories, ensuring a balance between central authority and local autonomy. Herodotus also emphasizes Darius' ambition to expand the empire further into Europe, particularly his attempts to subjugate the Greek city-states. It was under Darius that the first Persian invasion of Greece took place, culminating in the Battle of Marathon in 490 BCE. While Darius' forces were defeated at Marathon, Herodotus portrays him as a determined and strategic leader who sought to secure his empire's borders and assert Persian dominance over the Greeks. However, Darius' ambition also led to the eventual conflict that would consume his successor, Xerxes. Herodotus presents Darius as a ruler who was capable of both great wisdom and dangerous overreach, setting the stage for the larger clash between Persia and Greece that would define the next generation. Xerxes I, the hubristic king. Perhaps the most vividly portrayed figure in the histories is Xerxes I, the Persian king who led the second, and much larger, invasion of Greece in 480 BCE. Herodotus' depiction of Xerxes is complex. He is both a figure of immense power and wealth, and a cautionary example of hubris. Xerxes' decision to invade Greece, Herodotus suggests, was driven by a mixture of ambition, arrogance, and a desire to avenge his father's defeat at Marathon. Herodotus describes Xerxes' preparations for the invasion in great detail, emphasizing the sheer scale of the Persian army and navy, which were said to be the largest the world had ever seen. The crossing of the Hellespont with a massive pontoon bridge, which Xerxes ordered to be built, is one of the most famous episodes in the histories. When the bridge was destroyed by a storm, Xerxes' response was to order the sea to be whipped and fettered, an act that Herodotus presents as a symbol of his excessive pride and belief that he could control even the forces of nature. Despite the grandeur of his army, Xerxes' invasion ultimately failed, with the Greeks winning decisive victories at the battles of Salamis and Plataea. Herodotus uses Xerxes' downfall to illustrate the dangers of hubris, a theme that runs throughout Greek literature. In Herodotus' view, Xerxes' defeat was not just a military failure but a moral one, as his arrogance and belief in his own invincibility led him to overextend his power. Leonidas, the Spartan warrior king. On the Greek side, one of the most iconic figures in Herodotus' account is Leonidas, the Spartan king who led the defense of the narrow pass at Thermopylae against Xerxes' forces. Leonidas and his 300 Spartan soldiers, along with several thousand other Greek allies, held off the vastly larger Persian army for several days before being overwhelmed. Herodotus presents Leonidas as the embodiment of Spartan values, courage, discipline, and an unwavering commitment to defending Greece. The story of Leonidas' stand at Thermopylae became one of the most celebrated moments in Greek history, thanks in large part to Herodotus' vivid portrayal of the battle. He describes how Leonidas and his men fought to the death, refusing to surrender even when they were surrounded by Persian forces. Herodotus' account of Thermopylae emphasizes the contrast between the disciplined, self-sacrificing Spartans and the more numerous but less cohesive Persian forces. In Herodotus' view, the Greeks were able to achieve victory against overwhelming odds because of their superior moral character and dedication to freedom. Leonidas' heroism at Thermopylae served as a rallying cry for the Greeks in their subsequent battles against the Persians, and his legacy as a warrior king who fought and died for his people remains one of the most enduring symbols of the Persian Wars. Themistocles, the master strategist. Another key Greek figure in Herodotus' narrative is Themistocles, the Athenian general and politician who played a crucial role in the Greek victory at the Battle of Salamis. While Leonidas represented the Spartan ideal of martial valor, Themistocles was the embodiment of Athenian cunning and strategic brilliance. Herodotus portrays Themistocles as a shrewd and pragmatic leader who understood the importance of naval power in the fight against Persia. Themistocles' most famous contribution was his decision to lure the Persian fleet into the narrow straits of Salamis, where the larger and less maneuverable Persian ships were at a disadvantage. Herodotus describes how Themistocles outwitted Xerxes by sending him a false message, tricking the Persian king into committing his fleet to a battle in the narrow waters. The Greek victory at Salamis was one of the turning points of the war, and Herodotus credits Themistocles' intelligence and foresight with securing the survival of Greece. However, Herodotus also notes that Themistocles was a controversial figure in Athens, both admired and resented for his ambitious nature. After the war, Themistocles' political rivals accused him of arrogance and self-aggrandizement, leading to his eventual ostracism from Athens. Despite his later exile, Themistocles remains one of the most celebrated figures in Greek history, and Herodotus' account of his exploits at Salamis solidified his legacy as a master strategist. Other key figures, Croesus and Solon. Beyond the Persian Wars, Herodotus introduces readers to several other key figures whose stories reflect the broader themes of fate, power, and wisdom. One such figure is Croesus, the wealthy king of Lydia, whose encounter with the Athenian sage Solon serves as one of the moral lessons of the histories. Croesus, believing himself to be the happiest and most fortunate of men due to his vast wealth, is humbled by Solon, who reminds him that true happiness cannot be measured until one's life is complete and free of misfortune. Croesus' downfall, when his kingdom is conquered by Cyrus the Great, serves as a reminder of the unpredictability of fate and the limits of human power. Herodotus uses the story of Croesus and Solon to explore the themes of wisdom, hubris, and the impermanence of worldly success, underscoring the idea that even the mightiest rulers are subject to the whims of fortune. Herodotus' portrayal of these key figures, Cyrus, Darius, Xerxes, Leonidas, Themistocles, and others, offers a rich and multifaceted view of leadership in the ancient world. Through their stories, Herodotus explores the complexities of power, ambition, and morality, showing how the actions of individuals can shape the course of history. While these figures are often larger than life, Herodotus does not shy away from revealing their flaws, mistakes, and moments of hubris. By doing so, he humanizes these historical figures, making them not just subjects of study but relatable characters whose decisions continue to resonate through time. Storytelling and anecdotes, Herodotus' unique historical method. One of the most distinctive features of Herodotus the Histories is his storytelling style. Unlike modern historians, who tend to focus solely on factual accounts and analysis, Herodotus seamlessly blends history with anecdotes, myths, and personal observations, creating a rich and engaging narrative. This approach, while sometimes criticized for its inclusion of unverifiable or fantastical elements, is part of what makes Herodotus such a compelling figure in the history of historiography. His ability to weave together different strands of information, factual, anecdotal, and mythical, has earned him both praise and skepticism, yet it is precisely this combination that gives his work a timeless quality. Herodotus believed that to truly understand history, one had to look beyond the surface of events and consider the cultural, religious, and personal motivations of the people involved. His anecdotes, often filled with humor, irony, and moral lessons, offer insights into the human condition that go far beyond the simple recounting of battles and political events. Through his storytelling, Herodotus invites his readers to explore the world through a lens that embraces both rational inquiry and the mysteries of myth. Anecdotes as cultural insight. Herodotus' use of anecdotes serves as more than just entertainment. They offer crucial insights into the cultures and peoples he describes. By including these stories, Herodotus provides his readers with a glimpse into the values, beliefs, and customs of different societies. For example, when describing the Egyptians, Herodotus doesn't just list facts about their geography or political structure. He delves into their religious practices, funeral customs, and daily rituals, often through anecdotal stories he gathered during his travels. One such anecdote involves the Egyptians' reverence for animals, particularly cats. Herodotus recounts how, during a fire in an Egyptian home, the family's main concern was not to save their possessions but to ensure that their cats were protected. This small story, while seemingly trivial, highlights the deep religious and cultural significance that animals held in Egyptian society. Through such anecdotes, Herodotus gives his readers a more personal and relatable understanding of the people he encounters, allowing the audience to grasp the nuances of foreign cultures. Herodotus also uses anecdotes to explain the origin of customs and practices. In the histories, he frequently interrupts his main narrative to tell stories about how certain traditions began or why certain regions had particular practices. For example, he tells the story of King Amasis of Egypt, who once lived a carefree and disreputable life, but later became a wise and just ruler. This anecdote serves not only as an entertaining aside, but also as a lesson in the unpredictability of fate and the capacity for personal transformation, themes that run throughout Herodotus' work. The blending of myth and history. Herodotus is often referred to as a historian who stood at the crossroads between myth and fact. While he aimed to document historical events with accuracy, he also understood the power of myth in explaining the world and human behavior. For Herodotus, myths were not simply fanciful tales but important cultural narratives that shaped how people understood their past and their place in the world. Throughout the histories, Herodotus includes numerous mythological stories that reflect the beliefs of the people he encountered. One notable example is his account of the founding of the city of Cyrene, in which he attributes the city's establishment to a prophecy from the Oracle of Delphi. According to Herodotus, the oracle instructed the Greek settlers to sail to Libya and found a new colony. While this story blends myth with history, Herodotus does not dismiss it as mere fiction. Instead, he recognizes the importance of such myths in shaping the decisions and actions of historical figures. Similarly, Herodotus includes the story of the Trojan War, weaving it into his larger narrative of Greek history. While the historicity of the Trojan War has long been debated, Herodotus treats it as a significant event, acknowledging its role in the collective memory of the Greek people. For him, myth and history are not mutually exclusive but interconnected, each offering valuable insights into the motivations and values of different societies. Herodotus' inclusion of mythological elements can also be seen in his descriptions of natural phenomena. For instance, when discussing the Nile River and its mysterious flooding patterns, Herodotus admits that he is uncertain of the exact cause. Rather than dismissing the phenomenon as unknowable, he suggests that the gods may be responsible, reflecting the ancient belief in divine forces governing the natural world. This blend of rational inquiry and mythological explanation characterizes much of Herodotus' work, making him a bridge between the mythic past and the emerging scientific mindset of his time. Moral lessons through anecdotes. Herodotus' stories often carry moral or philosophical lessons, reflecting his belief that history should not only inform but also instruct. Many of his anecdotes serve as cautionary tales about the dangers of hubris, the unpredictability of fate, and the moral consequences of one's actions. These stories often highlight the flaws and vulnerabilities of even the most powerful figures, reinforcing the idea that no one is immune to the whims of fortune. One of the most famous moral anecdotes in the histories is the story of King Croesus of Lydia. Croesus, once the wealthiest man in the world, sought the advice of the Oracle of Delphi before going to war with Persia. The oracle told him that if he waged war, he would destroy a great empire. Believing this meant he would defeat Persia, Croesus attacked, only to realize too late that the empire he would destroy was his own. This story serves as a powerful lesson in the dangers of misinterpreting prophecy and the limits of human knowledge. Herodotus also tells the story of the meeting between Croesus and the Athenian lawgiver Solon, who visited Lydia during Croesus' reign. When Croesus asked Solon who he thought was the happiest man in the world, expecting Solon to name him, Solon instead spoke of common men who had lived good and virtuous lives. Solon's message was that true happiness cannot be measured by wealth or power but by the virtue of one's life and the blessings one receives at the end of it. This anecdote encapsulates one of Herodotus' central themes, that human fortunes are fickle and that even the most powerful individuals can be brought low by fate. The role of humor and irony. Humor and irony play a significant role in Herodotus' storytelling, adding another layer to his historical narrative. He often uses irony to highlight the contrast between expectation and reality, particularly when it comes to the actions of kings and rulers. One example is his account of Xerxes, the Persian king, and his hubristic belief that he could conquer Greece with his massive army. Herodotus describes how Xerxes' overconfidence led to his eventual defeat, using irony to underscore the idea that human ambition often exceeds its limits. Herodotus also employs humor in his portrayal of certain figures, particularly when recounting the more absurd or outlandish aspects of their behavior. For instance, he tells the story of Cambyses, the Persian king who, in a fit of madness, killed a sacred Apis bull in Egypt. Herodotus presents this act not only as a sign of Cambyses' cruelty but also as a ridiculous overreaction, poking fun at the king's erratic behavior. Through such anecdotes, Herodotus reveals the fallibility and sometimes absurdity of those in power, using humor to make a broader point about the limitations of human authority. The influence of oral tradition. Much of Herodotus' storytelling can be traced back to the oral traditions of ancient Greece. Before written history became widespread, stories were passed down through generations by word of mouth, often in the form of epic poetry or oral tales. Herodotus was influenced by this tradition, and his work retains many of the qualities of oral storytelling: vivid descriptions, direct dialogue, and a focus on memorable events and characters. Herodotus' writing reflects the performative nature of oral storytelling, with frequent digressions and asides that mirror the way a storyteller might capture the attention of an audience. These digressions, while sometimes criticized for interrupting the main narrative, are an essential part of Herodotus' method. They allow him to explore a wide range of topics and provide his readers with a more holistic view of the ancient world. By incorporating these stories, Herodotus ensures that the histories remains not just a dry recounting of events but a dynamic and engaging work of literature. Herodotus' use of storytelling, anecdotes, and mythological elements distinguishes him from many other historians of the ancient world. His willingness to blend fact with fiction, rational analysis with myth, and history with moral lessons gives the histories a unique character that has endured for millennia. While modern historians may question the accuracy of some of his accounts, Herodotus' work continues to captivate readers because of its rich narrative and engaging style. By embracing the power of storytelling, Herodotus was able to convey not just the facts of history but the deeper truths about human nature, culture, and the forces that shape our world. His anecdotes and stories offer timeless insights into the complexities of power, fate, and morality, ensuring that the histories remains one of the most influential and widely read works of ancient literature. The interplay between history and geography in Herodotus' work. One of the most fascinating aspects of the histories is how Herodotus intertwines geography with historical events. For Herodotus, geography was not just a backdrop to human events but a crucial factor that shaped the course of history itself. He believed that the natural world, the rivers, mountains, seas, and landscapes, played an active role in determining the successes and failures of civilizations. His detailed descriptions of geography not only offer a window into how ancient peoples understood the world around them but also demonstrate his belief that understanding the land was key to understanding history. Herodotus' geographic knowledge, while limited by the standards of modern cartography, was impressive for his time. His travels took him far beyond the borders of Greece, and his writings reflect a deep curiosity about the physical world. He describes the geography of not only Greece but also Egypt, Persia, Scythia, and many other regions, often in great detail. By incorporating geographic descriptions into his historical narrative, Herodotus gave his readers a fuller understanding of the forces at play in the ancient world, showing how the land itself influenced the rise and fall of empires. The Nile in Egypt, Geography as Destiny. One of the most famous examples of Herodotus' focus on geography is his detailed description of the Nile River and its importance to Egyptian civilization. Herodotus recognized that the Nile was the lifeblood of Egypt, describing how the river's annual flooding provided the fertile soil necessary for agriculture in an otherwise arid land. He famously stated, "Egypt is the gift of the Nile," acknowledging that without the river, the great civilization of Egypt could not have existed. Herodotus was particularly fascinated by the mystery of the Nile's flooding, which occurred every summer, nourishing the land with rich silt. He proposed several theories to explain this phenomenon, though he ultimately admitted that he did not know the true cause. This willingness to speculate, while also acknowledging the limits of his knowledge, is characteristic of Herodotus' approach to both geography and history. Despite his uncertainties, Herodotus' observations about the Nile demonstrate his understanding of how geography directly impacted the development of human societies. In addition to the Nile, Herodotus described other aspects of Egypt's geography, such as its deserts, its proximity to the Mediterranean, and its natural defenses. He noted that Egypt's relative isolation, surrounded by deserts on both sides, allowed it to develop a unique culture and maintain its independence for much of its history. Herodotus' attention to these geographic details helped explain why Egypt was able to thrive as one of the ancient world's most powerful and enduring civilizations. The role of the Aegean and Mediterranean seas. Herodotus also emphasized the importance of the seas in shaping the history of the Greek world. The Aegean and Mediterranean seas were central to the lives of the Greeks, providing them with trade routes, access to new lands, and the ability to connect with other cultures. Herodotus recognized that the geography of Greece, with its numerous islands, peninsulas, and coastline, played a key role in the development of the city-states and their maritime power. In his account of the Persian Wars, Herodotus frequently refers to the strategic importance of the seas. He describes how the Greek victory at the naval battle of Salamis in 480 BCE was a turning point in the war against the Persians, largely due to the Greeks' superior knowledge of their own waters. The narrow straits of Salamis, which limited the maneuverability of the larger Persian fleet, were key to the Greek victory. Herodotus makes it clear that geography, specifically the ability of the Greeks to use the seas to their advantage, was just as important as military strategy in determining the outcome of the battle. Herodotus also highlights the significance of maritime trade in shaping the fortunes of various Greek city-states, particularly Athens. He notes that Athens' rise to power was closely tied to its control of the seas and its ability to dominate the Aegean through its powerful navy. By emphasizing the role of geography in these events, Herodotus shows how the physical environment shaped the politics and power dynamics of the ancient Mediterranean world. Scythia and the challenges of geography. Herodotus' descriptions of geography extend beyond the familiar lands of Greece and Egypt to the more remote regions of the ancient world, such as Scythia. In his account of the Scythians, the nomadic tribes who lived in the vast steppes north of the Black Sea, Herodotus provides detailed descriptions of the region's geography, highlighting the challenges it posed for invaders. The Scythian homeland, characterized by its flat, open plains, made it difficult for any foreign power to conquer or control. Herodotus describes how the Scythians used the vastness of their territory to their advantage, employing hit-and-run tactics and retreating into the steppe when faced with superior forces. The lack of natural barriers, such as mountains or rivers, made it difficult for invaders to pin down the Scythians or engage them in a decisive battle. Herodotus also notes the harsh climate of Scythia, with its cold winters and limited resources, which further contributed to the resilience of the Scythians. He portrays the Scythians as a people who were shaped by their environment, tough, resourceful, and accustomed to a nomadic lifestyle that made them difficult to defeat. In this way, Herodotus uses geography to explain not only the success of certain civilizations but also the persistence of others who, despite lacking wealth or centralized power, were able to resist domination by more powerful neighbors. The Persian Empire, Geography and Power. Herodotus' descriptions of the Persian Empire highlight the vastness of its territory and the challenges of governing such a sprawling realm. The Persian Empire, under rulers like Cyrus the Great and Darius I, stretched from the Aegean Sea in the west to the Indus River in the east, encompassing a diverse array of peoples and landscapes. Herodotus recognized that the empire's success was due in large part to its ability to manage this vast territory through a combination of military power, diplomacy, and efficient administration. One of the key geographic challenges facing the Persian rulers, as described by Herodotus, was the need to maintain control over such a diverse and far-flung empire. The Persians built an extensive network of roads, known as the Royal Road, which allowed for the rapid movement of troops and communication across the empire. Herodotus emphasizes the importance of these roads in maintaining the unity of the empire, noting that the Persians were able to respond quickly to revolts or invasions thanks to their ability to move soldiers and supplies across great distances. However, Herodotus also points out the limitations of Persian power, particularly when it came to extending their control into Europe. The geography of Greece, with its mountainous terrain and narrow passes, made it difficult for the Persians to conquer the Greek city-states. Herodotus' account of the Battle of Thermopylae, where a small Greek force held off the much larger Persian army by defending a narrow pass, illustrates how geography could play a decisive role in shaping the outcome of military conflicts. The ends of the earth, Herodotus' fascination with the unknown. Herodotus was deeply interested in the lands that lay beyond the edges of the known world, often referring to these distant regions as the ends of the earth. His curiosity about the geography of these far-off places led him to include descriptions of places like India, Arabia, and Africa, even though his knowledge of these regions was often based on second-hand accounts or speculation. In his description of India, for example, Herodotus tells the story of giant ants that supposedly dug up gold dust from the earth, which the locals then collected. While this account may seem fantastical, it reflects Herodotus' broader interest in the mysteries of the natural world and the strange and exotic lands that lay beyond the reach of Greek exploration. Similarly, his accounts of Arabia, with its wealth of spices and precious goods, demonstrate his fascination with the riches of distant lands and the geographic factors that made these regions both alluring and inaccessible to the Greeks. Herodotus' descriptions of these remote regions often blend fact with myth, but they reveal his genuine curiosity about the world beyond the Mediterranean. He was eager to learn about the geography, customs, and resources of these distant lands, even if the information he received was sometimes inaccurate or embellished. Geography as a force in history. For Herodotus, geography was not just a passive backdrop to human events, it was an active force that shaped the course of history. The natural world, the rivers, mountains, seas, and plains, played a critical role in determining the outcomes of battles, the rise and fall of empires, and the development of cultures. Herodotus understood that geography could both enable and limit human ambition, offering opportunities for expansion and wealth while also posing challenges that could not be easily overcome. By integrating geography into his historical narrative, Herodotus provided his readers with a fuller understanding of the forces that shaped the ancient world. His descriptions of the natural world, from the fertile banks of the Nile to the rugged mountains of Greece, demonstrate his belief that to understand history, one must also understand the land. This holistic approach to history, which combines human events with the physical environment, remains one of the most distinctive features of Herodotus' work. Herodotus' ability to weave geography into his historical narrative sets him apart from other historians of his time. His detailed descriptions of the natural world, combined with his understanding of how geography influenced human behavior, give the histories a depth and richness that continues to captivate readers today. While some of his geographic knowledge was based on speculation or hearsay, Herodotus' curiosity and fascination with the world around him allow him to create a vivid and engaging portrait of the ancient world. Herodotus' legacy as both a historian and a geographer is reflected in the way he used geography to explain not just where events took place, but why they unfolded the way they did. His work remains a testament to the power of geography in shaping human history, and his influence can still be seen in the ways historians and geographers approach the study of the past. Herodotus' influence on later historians and writers. Herodotus' work has left an indelible mark on the field of history and on the way subsequent generations understand and write about the past. As the father of history, Herodotus was not only the first to attempt a systematic recording of historical events, but also one of the earliest to combine storytelling with historical inquiry, providing a model for future historians and writers. His methods, themes, and narrative style influence historians from antiquity through the Renaissance and beyond, shaping the discipline of history as we know it today. While Herodotus' combination of fact and fiction, his reliance on oral sources, and his inclusion of myths and legends were often criticized by later historians, his work nevertheless set a precedent for how history could be written in a way that is both informative and engaging. From ancient Rome to the Enlightenment, historians have grappled with Herodotus' legacy, some following in his footsteps, while others sought to distinguish their own methods from his. Yet, regardless of their approach, Herodotus' influence can be seen in the work of historians who have followed him, especially in how they address the complexities of human nature, culture, and the interplay between myth and reality. Thucydides, the critical successor. Perhaps the most famous and immediate critic of Herodotus was Thucydides, the Athenian historian who chronicled the Peloponnesian War between Athens and Sparta. Thucydides admired Herodotus' ambition to record history but took issue with his inclusion of myths, legends, and unverified stories. In contrast to Herodotus, Thucydides strove for what he considered a more scientific and factual approach to history, focusing on verifiable events and first-hand accounts. Thucydides' method was to rely on direct evidence and avoid the fantastical elements that he believed detracted from historical accuracy. Despite these criticisms, Thucydides' work is deeply indebted to Herodotus in many ways. Like Herodotus, Thucydides was concerned with understanding the motivations and actions of leaders, the causes of war, and the impact of human nature on history. While Thucydides focused more on politics and military strategy, his detailed analysis of the Peloponnesian War was, in part, inspired by Herodotus' sweeping narratives of the Greco-Persian Wars. Both historians sought to explain not just what happened but why it happened, exploring the underlying causes of conflict and the decisions that shaped history. Thucydides' more rigorous approach to history would come to dominate the field for centuries, with many later historians attempting to distance themselves from the storytelling elements that defined Herodotus' work. However, Herodotus' influence persisted, particularly in the way he combined cultural observations with historical events, an approach that continued to inspire writers interested in the broader human context of history. Roman historians, Livy and Tacitus. Herodotus' influence extended to Roman historians, particularly Livy and Tacitus, who both adopted elements of Herodotian storytelling in their works. Livy's Conduta, a monumental history of Rome, echoed Herodotus in its scope and ambition, as well as in its inclusion of legendary figures and founding myths. Like Herodotus, Livy recognized the importance of myth in shaping the identity and culture of a people. His recounting of Rome's early history includes stories of Romulus and Remus, the city's legendary founders, blending historical fact with myth in a way that mirrored Herodotus' approach. Tacitus, one of the most prominent Roman historians, also showed traces of Herodotus' influence, particularly in his exploration of cultural differences and his moral reflections on power and leadership. In his works, such as the Annals and the Histories, Tacitus analyzed the behavior of Roman emperors and the consequences of their rule, much like Herodotus did with Persian kings. Tacitus' emphasis on the moral lessons of history, as well as his use of anecdotes to illustrate the character of his subjects, can be seen as a continuation of the Herodotian tradition, even as Tacitus strove for a more detached and analytical style. Medieval and Renaissance historians. During the Middle Ages, Herodotus' work was preserved and transmitted through Byzantine scholars, ensuring its survival for later generations. While much of medieval historiography was influenced by Christian theology, Herodotus' secular approach to history, focusing on human actions rather than divine intervention, continued to resonate with historians interested in worldly events. His descriptions of foreign lands and peoples also inspired a sense of curiosity and wonder about the wider world, which would become a hallmark of medieval and Renaissance travel writing. The Renaissance, in particular, saw a revival of interest in classical texts, including Herodotus' The Histories. As European scholars rediscovered and translated ancient Greek works, Herodotus' narrative style and approach to history regained prominence. Renaissance thinkers admired Herodotus for his humanism, his focus on the experiences, cultures, and motivations of people across different civilizations. His attention to cultural diversity and the way he highlighted the shared experiences of humanity appealed to the Renaissance spirit of exploration and discovery. One of the most notable Renaissance figures influenced by Herodotus was Niccolò Machiavelli. While Machiavelli's The Prince is often viewed through the lens of political science, his broader historical works, such as the Discourses on Livy, reflect a Herodotian interest in the interplay between fortune and human agency. Machiavelli's emphasis on the importance of virtù, human excellence or skill, and fortuna, fate or chance, echoes Herodotus' belief that even the greatest leaders are subject to the unpredictability of events beyond their control. Herodotus and the Enlightenment, Voltaire and Gibbon. The Enlightenment brought new scrutiny to historical writing, with a focus on rationality, empirical evidence, and the scientific method. Herodotus, with his inclusion of myths and legends, was often criticized by Enlightenment thinkers for what they saw as his uncritical acceptance of improbable stories. Voltaire, the French Enlightenment philosopher and historian, famously dismissed Herodotus as a teller of tales, accusing him of mixing fact with fiction in a way that undermined the credibility of his work. However, not all Enlightenment thinkers were dismissive of Herodotus. Edward Gibbon, the author of The History of the Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire, admired Herodotus for his ability to capture the complexity of human nature and the forces that shape history. Gibbon's work, like Herodotus, combined a broad historical scope with detailed analysis of cultural, political, and religious factors. Gibbon recognized that history was not just a collection of facts but a reflection of human experience, much as Herodotus had done in his own time. Gibbon's admiration for Herodotus can be seen in his willingness to explore not only the events of history but also the motivations, beliefs, and actions of historical figures. Gibbon, like Herodotus, understood that history is shaped as much by individuals and their decisions as by the broader movements of politics and empire. Herodotus and modern historiography. In the modern era, historians have come to appreciate Herodotus' contributions in new ways. While his methods may not align with the standards of modern historical analysis, his ability to weave together diverse sources, his attention to cultural differences, and his narrative style continue to influence historians and writers today. Modern historians recognize Herodotus' role in establishing the foundations of historical inquiry, particularly his emphasis on the importance of first-hand accounts and multiple perspectives. Herodotus' approach to history as a blend of fact, myth, and cultural observation has also influenced contemporary historical writing, particularly in the fields of cultural history, anthropology, and world history. His work is seen as an early example of global history, as he sought to understand not just the history of Greece but the history of the known world, from Egypt and Persia to Scythia and India. In literary circles, Herodotus' storytelling has also had a lasting impact. His narrative techniques, use of dialogue, and incorporation of moral lessons have inspired writers of historical fiction, travel literature, and epic storytelling. Authors like Gore Vidal and Robert Graves have drawn on Herodotian methods in their historical novels, blending historical facts with fictional elements to create vivid and engaging narratives. Herodotus' enduring legacy. Herodotus' legacy as the father of history is secure, not just because he was the first to systematically record events, but because of the way he approached history as a study of humanity in all its complexity. His willingness to explore not just what happened, but why it happened, and to include diverse cultural perspectives, set the stage for future generations of historians. While Herodotus' blending of fact and fiction may have drawn criticism from some quarters, it is precisely this combination that gives his work its lasting appeal. His ability to capture the human experience, its triumphs, failures, and mysteries, continues to resonate with readers and scholars alike. In an age when history is often reduced to cold facts and figures, Herodotus reminds us that history is ultimately about people, their stories, and the forces that shape their lives. Herodotus' influence on later historians and writers is a testament to the power of storytelling in shaping our understanding of the past. His work continues to inspire not just historians but anyone who seeks to understand the complexities of the human experience, making him one of the most enduring figures in the history of thought. In this exploration of Herodotus and his histories, we delved into his unique approach to recording events, blending myth, anecdote, and fact. We examined how he shaped the foundations of historiography by combining human stories with grand narratives like the Persian Wars and key figures like Cyrus, Darius, and Leonidas. Herodotus' fascination with geography and its role in history, along with his emphasis on cultural differences, provided a rich view of the ancient world. From Egypt to Scythia, his observations helped us understand how land, culture, and conflict intersected. We also explored how later historians, from Thucydides to Gibbon, engaged with or critiqued Herodotus' methods. Despite being criticized for his occasional blending of fact and myth, his influence on the way history has been written is undeniable. His work laid the foundation for centuries of storytelling, cultural history, and historical inquiry. Thank you for watching and embarking on this journey through history with me. If you've enjoyed this dive into Herodotus' world, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to stay updated with more fascinating historical content. I appreciate your support. Until next time.